All right, everyone. Today we are coming with, I don't know, kind of a little bit of a different topic for us. I mean, it's still going to be in the realms of entertainment. We're going to be talking a lot about the Star Wars and Lucasfilm of it all here as we kind of go through. But today we have a very special topic. And you know what it is, Cassia? It is CGI. What's CGI?
It's the Cape Guardia Regional Airport, IATA Airport Code CGI, an airport in Missouri in the United States.
That's true. That's true. It is that. It is also the Coast Guard Intelligence, the Catholic Guides of Ireland, compacted graphite iron. There's a lot of CGIs in the world, but the one we're talking about today specifically is the one that relates to the movies and television shows that we're all watching and taking in. Of course, that is computer-generated imagery, and it's gotten quite the fervor around it here. You know, in light of the strikes and things that are going on, how that relates to that, and obviously, you know, as moviegoers and TV watchers, how we're taking in that content, what we think about it, and stuff like that. So we thought it would just be kind of a fun conversation to have, you know, talking about some different aspects of CGI.
Yeah. So if you pull up computer-generated imagery on Wikipedia, the definition is CGI is a specific technology or application of computer graphics for creating or improving images in art, printed media, simulators, videos, and video games. These images are either static, like still images, or dynamic, like moving images. And CGI refers to both 2D computer graphics and more frequently 3D computer graphics with the purpose of designing characters, virtual worlds, or scenes and special effects like in films, television programs, commercials, all the rest. And the application of CGI for creating / improving animations is called computer animation or CGI animation.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of different kind of aspects of CGI. I think normally, like if you just stop someone on the street and say, "What do you think about CGI in movies?" They're going to think of things like Gollum from Lord of the Rings or Jar Jar, from the Phantom Menace. Stuff like that is what you think about, or maybe you think about some CGI like environments, like in the newer Marvel stuff, or the way they do like their suits. But CGI can apply to a lot of different aspects of films, right? So beyond, CGI character models, CGI is used obviously in animation, in newer animation, Pixar stuff like that. Obviously it can be used in the way that you create landscapes, expand on landscapes, how you do work in your matte paintings, how you, kind of do all of that stuff, from like digital compositing where you're layering things together. You can do that digitally now, and all of that stuff falls under the umbrella of CGI. And I think that that's kind of interesting to think about when you think about CGI. So it's not necessarily, just a computer animated character that's acting alongside of your other, human flesh and blood characters. It's this whole gamut of stuff that CGI is used for.
Yeah, and what blew my mind is that the first feature film to use CGI in a live-action film, do you know what it is?
Well, so the first instance of CGI being used in a film is for the opening sequence in Vertigo, which is a Alfred Hitchcock film. That was in 1958. So John Whitney and Larry Cuba basically used this anti-aircraft targeting mechanism, and they realized that if they just plotted different points on that targeting mechanism, that they could create basically any kind of like shape and things that they wanted. And if you watch the beginning of Vertigo, that's what you get. It's a bunch of like little like spirally things kind of going on through that credit sequence, and that's kind of where it got its start. And then that sort of same technology was used in different like television things and commercials and like tech demo sorts of things like that. But if we're talking about like a 2D animation in a film, I think the first live action of that, I could be mistaken here, but I believe was in Michael Crichton's telling of Westworld, 1973.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one, but I've seen at least the first few seasons of Westworld, so It's very cerebral.
It is very cerebral, absolutely. So, yeah, that was the first 2D animation was in Westworld in 1973, and the first 3D animation was in Future World, the sequel to that, in 1976. So that makes sense. And then we get into, kind of our bread and butter here at the Old Republic podcast, Star Wars in 1977. When Luke and R2 and team are on Yavin and they're looking at the Death Star plans and they get the little run up through the trench. That was done CGI.
Yeah, it's funny because the CGI was done. They couldn't really change it. So if you look at the Death Star and the plans, they don't quite match. But Rogue One used the imperfect CGI, so that's a fun detail.
That's right. Apparently, the Bothans maybe only got like 99% of the file uploaded or something. It's hard to say. So that kind of gets us started there into Star Wars, like I said, in 1977. And then you have Industrial Light and Magic, who's really kind of almost like carrying the torch in terms of computer animated stuff. So 1982, Star Trek Wrath of Khan they did, which was the first CGI landscape. They did The Adventures of Andre and Wally B, which was the first fully computer animated short in 1984, using a little computer called Pixar, and we know what happened with that. In 1985, Young Sherlock Holmes, there was the stained glass knight that pops out of there. He's on screen for like 10 seconds, but that was the first fully CGI character in a film. Went on to do Willow, that had like that photorealistic like morphing sequence, the Abyss, like water column that's coming to life, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade was the first film to use fully digital compositing in that film. So ILM did a lot of the heavy lifting, I guess, in terms of getting CGI to the forefront of the way that movies were going to be made.
Yeah, and that's part of Lucas and Lucasfilm's legacy that I don't know if people know enough about. Because when I think of Star Wars, I don't just think of like practical shot on film. I think of like pushing the edge, and sometimes people like that, sometimes people don't, but movies would not look as good as they can. I don't think like without like ILM and THX sound.
Yeah, absolutely. They were very important. Like I said, in kind of the way that movies were being put together, what was possible in movies, and they were doing a lot of that stuff. They weren't the only ones. Of course, there were other studios and design companies doing stuff too. So you had other like CGI like breakthrough films and shows that people think of when they think of CGI effects and stuff like that. So like Tron and The Last Starfighter, Akira, Doctor Who, Labyrinth, Total Recall, stuff like that were all, pretty influential in terms of CGI and what it was capable of, and what it was doing. And then as I was going kind of through the history, I have kind of like my own kind of personal opinion. It's one of my favorite films, but it's kind of like the crossing the first threshold for CGI, I think. And that is 1992's Terminator 2. That was kind of what opened the door, I think, in terms of what you could do with people in terms of CGI. You go through that door, and on the other side of that, just 1 year later, is Jurassic Park. And at that point, the doors are blown wide open, the toothpaste is out of the tube, and CGI is the way that movies are going to be made going forward.
Yeah, and I did the math. 2023 minus 1958, do you know what it is?
That is a lot of math that you're asking me to do right now, so I'm gonna defer to you.
65. So CGI is now a senior citizen, I guess.
Oh, that's good. They're eligible for their senior citizen discount. Good job, CGI. That's great. But yeah, like I said, I think Jurassic Park was kind of that final instance, and ILM did the effects for that, and when people talk about CGI and the CGI is bad or CGI is good, or CGI isn't as good as it used to be, they always look at Jurassic Park.
Yeah, it seemed like when the prequels were coming out, they're like, oh, the CGI in Jurassic Park was perfect. Like, they should have just stopped there. And it's funny because, like, I did read more reviews than I think I realized growing up, and it kind of seemed like maybe it was a generational thing, but like a lot of the reviewers are just like, I'm gonna discount like some quality for the CGI, and it just doesn't look good. And I think it wasn't until like the Avengers came out, like people like reviewers stopped complaining about CGI.
Yeah, I mean that's fair because just like today, when we like to complain about CGI, and I think we have some comments from Marcus and probably our own both things. So when we think about bad CGI, we think about stuff that's coming out right now because everything looks better when you're 10 years old than it does, when you're our age for sure. So the people that were reviewing Jurassic Park in 1993 were our age now, and now we're those people's ages. So it's our turn to complain about what is next. I think. Yeah, it's just kind of the way that works. But like I said, when Jurassic Park came out, it was evolutionary in a sense. You think of Star Wars and the way they use those models to give scope and speed and space to things that were happening on screen. Jurassic Park really opened the door in terms of what you were able to do with these computer models. Between the dinosaurs, between the way that the landscapes worked, between the stuff that you had. Interactively happening like within the Jeeps and stuff like that. It was like this whole like different toolbox, and obviously you have Steven Spielberg, you have ILM that are doing this, working together, who work together on everything, all the way back like to ET and stuff like that. So had a really good working relationship, and obviously going to put a lot of time and care and money into making that look good, and therefore I think in my eyes it gets held up as kind of this benchmark sort of property that really kind of ushered in CGI for better or worse, because when that became the norm, CGI became all the rage, and then it started getting used in all sorts of things for all sorts of things. For example, I watched Kiss the Girls just a couple of nights ago, which is like this kind of like this crime thriller sort of thing. And I'd watched it back in 1996 or 7, whenever it came out. I didn't really realize it at the time, but in the opening sequence, there's like a CGI car crash, which didn't need to be done in CGI, but that was kind of the fashion of things then, and I think it's still kind of the fashion of things now for the most part.
Yeah, there can be just like a large, I guess grid, like from good, best, bad, ugly on CGI, like, and obviously like Brian and I, we aren't CGI experts. We're not computer animators, maybe we'll have to get someone who's more familiar with it, like in the future if we want to, like if anything can happen, maybe you can CGI it in later, having an expert, but
that's right. We're recording on a green audio screen right now. We can layer in whatever we want later. And I think it's important to say here is now that we've kind of gone through the history, we're going to talk about some CGI that we like or don't like or whatever that is. I think it's important to also say that computer animators are very good at their job. They're very passionate at their job, and I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that they're incredibly overworked at all times. So if CGI looks bad or you don't think that it's good, it's very... I'm going to say that it's almost never at the fault of the creator, the artist that is doing the CGI stuff. It could be the way that the director or producer wants it to look. It could be a time deadline. It could be any number of things. I don't think any artist sets out to put out something that you think is quote unquote bad. It's just it's just kind of the nature of the industry and churning things out in the sense. I was looking this up just before we got started, Cassia, because I thought it was kind of interesting and something I wanted to take a look at. So I've talked about Jurassic Park. Now we'll probably bring it up another time or two, but in the year that Jurassic Park came out, 1993, there were, let me see here, 267 films released that year, versus the year 2019, that was the year that Avengers Endgame and Rise of Skywalker both came out. There were 910 releases that year. So it's kind of the landscape of movie making and the time and the turnover of these projects is just so incredibly fast now. You have to take that, I think, with a grain of salt when you're thinking of the way something might specifically look. So,
yeah, and I think like I totally 110% agree with you. Like, if CGI is bad in a movie, it's probably because the animators are overworked and underpaid, and maybe you just have a director who doesn't know how to frame shots or film them in an order to give animators the most time to work on them. And I don't know if, like, that's just kind of been a trend more recently, or, like, I've kind of just have gotten more aware of it. Because I think we have, like, maybe a little bit of a list of, like, our personal, like, best, good, bad, and ugly, CGI effects. And I think, like, some of the best effects are when you have, like, directors who know how to kind of film those shots and are working with, like, like, the best people, like, and they're incorporated. It's not just, like, kind of last minute, like, reshoots, and they're like, take this mustache off of this actor because we need it out now,
Right.
So
Yeah.
we'll
you
get into that.
you get 48 hours to get this mustache off of this guy. Yeah, I mean, it's, as we mentioned kind of at the top, right? CGI is not like this this magic, like, paintbrush of magic that you can wield. It's a tool. It's a movie making tool, right? So I mean, everything down to the particular film you're using, the way that things are lit, and all those things have to work in conjunction. And some directors and cinematographers and stuff are better at kind of incorporating that. Others aren't, and that's just kind of the nature of the thing. It's similar to if you look at something. Like the thing that Mandalorian is, the volume. If you look at the volume, some of that looks really good. There were instances of its use in Andor that looked really good. There have been instances, especially in this last season of Mandalorian, that looked spectacular. But they have a couple seasons and using that under their belt now. It's this new tool that you have to figure out how to use and how to use it the best. And not everyone is going to be able to use it as well as others, or have the time to learn on it, or things like that. So, like I said, it's just kind of a tool that you can use, and just like anything, some people are better at it than others.
Yeah, and, like, I don't know, a sword is a tool, and there's that saying, like, like the two sides of a sword, like a double-edged sword. It can, like, have good consequences, and it can have bad consequences. So did you kind of want to get into what you think the best CGI effects that you think are?
Absolutely, you were supposed to say. And speaking of double-edged swords and the good side of the sword, what is the good when it comes to CGI? For sure.
You're better at transitions than I am, so.
It's a transition is just a tool that we have in our arsenal here.
And I just fail most of the time, but it's fine.
On the podcast. Yeah, so there is definitely some good CGI, and a lot of the things that I have on my list kind of are on the good part of the CGI and the bad part of the CGI. So we mentioned Jurassic Park, of course. The first Matrix movie, I feel like, is a good example of good ways to use CGI and camera trickery in that film. I think that the sequels of the Matrix are less good at using CGI in a realistic fashion. I think that the CGI in Lord of the Rings is really excellent, specifically and talking about things like the kind of the dead army that comes in later on, which is kind of close to some stuff that happens, I think, in one of the films you're going to bring up. Obviously, Avatar is kind of this benchmark of what you can use computers to do if you set your mind to it. The newer Planet of the Apes films, I think, look really, really good in their creature design and the way that they're able to use, CGI motion capture to tell that story. And then even like, some newer stuff too, like Kong versus Godzilla, which came out, I think in 2020, potentially. I thought that actually looked really good as well. Had really neat kind of weather effects and things like that, and telling kind of this more bombastic story. Television, there's some really great stuff. The new Star Trek stuff I think looks great. I don't watch a lot of it, but from what I've seen, it looks really good. The way they use CGI in The Last of Us to kind of expand on the settings and things, particularly the episode that's set in the mall, which was all filmed on one floor of the mall, and the whole rest of the mall was done in computers, and it looked exactly like a mall that I would have went to back in the late 90s for sure. Some of the Marvel stuff looks okay. WandaVision, Loki, I think look pretty good in terms of their use of CGI. Some of it's not so great. And then, of course, you have like all of Pixar. Even if you think that the Pixar stories aren't as good as they used to be, they are. You're just older now. But I think that the Pixar films still look spectacular. Every time I see the newest one, I say, wow, I don't know if animation can ever look prettier than this, and every time it does. And my last example here of good is the special edition of Star Wars, which is also going to be on my bad list.
Yeah, it's funny because, like, some movies, like, they have really good effects. They can have good effects, they can have bad effects, and I don't think, like, there's ever, like, like, ugly effects with some of them that I like, but, so I think my favorite all-time CGI effect is actually Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean 2 and 3. Some reviewers back in the day were like, oh, it's makeup, like you can see his eyes and stuff, but those are fake CGI eyes. CGIs.
CGIs. Oh.
Yeah. So I just was blown away because there's so much emotion in that, and I still just have no idea how they made it. Like, if it was just like the perfect storm, nautical pun, but of just a director who knew how to best utilize and film those scenes. A great actor. I think they had ILM just making the best effects at the time, and they were probably given enough time to really do those effects, but I don't know. If someone was involved with the making of Pirates of the Caribbean and they want to tell us, let us know. But I think Davy Jones is my favorite and best effect that I've seen. And I mean, in our episodes, I think I've also mentioned, like, just the skyscapes and world building in the prequel trilogy. I love it so much. And that's just like the sunsets, sunrise on Coruscant. I just love it so much. I think the buildings look so good. Then you have Gollum, and some people are like, oh, it doesn't even look like the shadows are right, and it matches with the environment. But I'm like, this is the first, or I guess second, like, person, like, in a mocap suit, kind of like, and the characters on screen are interacting, with it. It's just so amazing. And I think Gollum's a bit better than Jar Jar, but without Jar Jar, I think, like, without Jar Jar, I don't think people would say, like, Gollum looked as good, because they wouldn't have been used to it, I did think King Kong in Peter Jackson's King Kong, I think that came out in 2005, I want to say. I think it was an overlong and at times disgusting movie, because I'm like, ew, bugs, I hate this, but King Kong was good, And then Avatar 1 and 2, I think it's just like, even if you don't like the story, the CGI, like, it's good. The first Matrix, it was amazing when I saw it for the first time. And those dinos in the first Jurassic Park, man, like, they still look good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then under good, I put Clone Troopers because they were CGI. And then the Matrix sequels, I put them under good as well. And then bad, I put the Hobbit movies, and then the younger Jabba the Hutt in the special edition. And then Ugly, I'll save Ugly. So, yeah.
Fair enough. I didn't really have anything in Ugly necessarily, but I had some bad. I also thought that the Jabba the Hutt in the special edition does not look particularly good. I think some of the special edition stuff looks great. Particularly like the expansion of like the scenery and the windows, like in Bespin, I think looks fantastic. And really happy to have stuff like that. That looks great. Of course, being old and jaded, the newer DC and Marvel movies don't look as good, I think, but I'm gonna get to a little bit of a reasoning on that. Cats is one that's weird and off-putting. I don't like that. In terms of that, and I don't know, something that we just watched very recently, a movie now that's gaining kind of a second steam here, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. What's up with that gopher, the little CGI gopher? Not that good. Why didn't they just use like a stock footage of a real gopher? That would have been better.
They didn't want to harm a real gopher. What if he got hit by an atom bomb?
They harmed my eyes with the fake gopher. Should have been a real gopher. Could have been trained. It would have been safe from atomic blasts. They could have had a little gopher fridge for it to hide in. That would have been good.
That would have been hilarious, actually, if the gopher got in with him. Now I kind of wish that the gopher had more screen time. So
yeah. Justice for the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull gopher is what we need.
Yeah, I want the gopher cut. Under Ugly, I put Cats. I saw that, like, I streamed it. I paid for that rental, I believe.
Wow.
And I was like, why did I watch this? Like, I watched it, but can I explain the plot? No. And just the effects, I'm just like, I think there were several conversations they could have had at any point that they never did. I don't understand why they did what they did, but they did it. And Cavill's stash, like in the original Justice League, release. They should have just had they could have just like done so many other things. Like, it's like, oh, when he was dead, he wasn't really dead, but he grew a beard and a mullet. So yeah, that's just how he looks now. But they did what they did. And the cool thing is we got the Snyder cut, so we don't have to watch the stash, whatever they did there, in the original cut. Yeah,
that's true. The unfortunate bit is then you have to watch the Snyder cut, which is my hot take of the episode, for sure. Sick burn. So yeah, that is kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly, as we see it, as judicated here by the Old Republic podcast. But I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of where those lists come from and what I think is kind of a symptom of those. And I mentioned a little bit, talking about Jurassic Park is, that now we're older and it's easier to kind of pick these things apart. It's not as magical. If you're 10 years old right now and you're going to watch, I don't know, Ant-Man, it looks amazing. You don't care if it looks good or if the stuff is less realistic or not, right? Because you're 10 and it's fun and it's comic booky and you don't care. But if you're old and grumpy, then like myself, then you're going to say, I don't know, it doesn't look that good. And I think that part of the problem of that is I think that bad CGI is a really easy scapegoat for a reason to not like something. Like, it's harder to talk about a movie and be like, oh, these are the things that I don't like and why. Like, that's hard conversation to have on online or on your Letterboxd review or something like that. But it's easy to be like, I don't like this because the CGI was terrible, right? It's kind of like an easy out for why you don't like something without having to really like verbalize what you didn't like about it, or analyzing the story too much. I think that that's part of it. Another part of it, I think, at least kind of in our lifetimes, maybe it's not as big of a deal going forward. But, I remember watching Terminator 2 like 10,000 times on a little 13-inch TV that I have in my house, in my bedroom, right? I would put in my VHS tape, which is like the worst format for watching anything ever. And I would watch it on this little tiny TV. And I would think that it looked amazing. And now if I watch it, it's going to be like in 4K, like on this huge TV that I have in my house that costs, I don't know, like a fraction of what that little 13-inch TV costs. And it's going to have so much more like depth of color and things that, flaws get highlighted then in that sense. I remember when like the HD format came out and how weird everything looked because it was all of a sudden in like this super crisp, literal, but high definition. And so I think that kind of plays a part of it too. I don't think it's going to be as big of a deal, for, people now that are, 20, younger than that, coming into play. But especially in my lifetime, I think, that technology changed, and it changed so vastly, so fast, that it's easy to, to pull apart those flaws in that way too.
Yeah, I mean, once I get a 4K player and can watch all the 4Ks, maybe I'll be like, yeah, everything's ruined, but call it a day. Maybe when I get the 4K version of The Mummy Returns, I'll be like, oh, the Scorpion King looks even worse, and I think that's like my ultimate ugly CGI effect, but, yeah, but it's interesting because like effects and time kind of march on, and some of the effects that I love the most are, from like old French films like Beauty and the Beast, and The Blood of a Poet. Some effects are timeless and remind you of theater, and then some CGI is just good, and maybe it's just like sometimes we can't predict like what's going to take off, what will last, what will be beloved forever, but I think CGI is here to stay, but I think in some ways it can get worse, and in some ways it can get better, but I think, like, maybe just the key is, like, keep effects, people in the conversation when you're filming them. Don't just, like, be like, oh, we kind of, like, improvised, kind of away from the planned shots that we thought, because we were just having fun on set, so just deal with that, and can you get them back to us in like 2 weeks? Actually, no, a week and a half, so what do you think?
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and these things take time, and you can certainly see in films that take their time to do those things. Neither of us mentioned Dune, which is kind of absurd. But,
oh my gosh, oh my gosh, I'm a failure now.
Yeah, that's right. We canceled ourselves over Dune. We were at one time a Dune podcast. We probably would have brought it up then. But I think that, if you look at something like that where, the filmmaker and the studio and things are willing to set aside the time to make sure that it looks, as perfect as possible, then that's great. But unfortunately, that's not kind of this fast turnaround, streaming everything on demand sort of world that we live in. So I think that, you have to have movie makers and studios that are willing to kind of take that extra step. Something interesting as I was doing a little bit of this research here, in terms of the time, and I'd mentioned kind of how like there are like triple the amount of movies coming out, now versus in 1993. Something very significant happened, and it revolves around George Lucas and Attack of the Clones. 2002, Attack of the Clones was the first movie that was shot completely digitally, right? And that opened the door, right? Movie theaters had to change the way that they showed movies and things. He took a big gamble on making this digital movie making, which is great, and it's neat, and it's cheaper, and George Lucas really wanted to kind of lower the barrier for entry for people to be able to make movies, right? You could buy a digital camera pretty cheap, and shoot a movie on it, and it would look great, versus paying $80,000 for some 35 millimeter film to film on, right?
Which is
not everyone can do that.
Inexpensive.
Exactly. But what that does, kind of the flip side of it, the bad edge of that sword then is that all these movies could just be cranked out, mass produced, so to speak. So we went from 2001, there were 412 releases, and then in 2002 there were 570 releases. 2003 667, 2004 700. So I mean, literally the amount of films almost doubled, kind of in that like 2 to 3 year window where people were starting to film things digitally. And I think that movie studios and stuff kind of saw that and said, man, we can make these movies really cheap and really fast. Let's do that. We'll do a lot of that. And I think that's kind of where you started to see that happen. And if you look at like the mid 2000s CGI, a few exceptions, and we talked about some of those, most of it's pretty bad.
Yeah. I mean, like, and just kind of remembering, like, the reviews, like, and, like, sometimes, like, CGI would bother me, too, and it really wasn't, like, I think the MCU has some really good effects, but once every superhero in the MCU started to get this, like, what did they call it in the movies? It's like nanotech, like suits, and like some of it look good, but now some of it just looks a little lazy, a little sloppy. And I think that's just because they're cranking so many of these out per year now, But like the Avengers, I was amazed. Like I was like, even though like I kind of like burned with the flame of like 1,000 Suns for like the prequel trilogy. Some people are like, oh, it has CGI, and like I didn't like Jar Jar, so it's automatically bad, I was like, the Avengers, like people like this, and the effects like look good, like, and I think that was kind of the turning point, like where CGI was like not instantly discarded. And I think we had like some really good films. Like, I kind of wonder if it was kind of just like during the pandemic, like where CGI kind of like people were working from home and kind of overworked, and like a lot of things were up in the air. Like, do you think that's kind of like what caused like this? Like, it seems like a lot of CGI coming out right now is just like unfinished. Like, do you think that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about something that's a big property, like Marvel in that sense, I mean, this year, kind of in this post-pandemic world, we're going to have 3 major Marvel releases, right? We had Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, we had Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and we're going to have the Marvels later this year. That's 3 giant, computer heavily relied on films that are going to get made in this year. And I mean, they probably were in production maybe for the last year or so, after the pandemic. That is a lot of work to be done on those films. And I think that's part of it. I think the other part of it too, I think people kind of forget, and we're kind of getting off of what we're talking about, is you had Iron Man came out in 2008, and then you had the Avengers Endgame came out in 2019. So it was 21 years of building to Endgame. So once Endgame was over, people kind of expected that same sort of emotional connection with all of those characters that, had originally taken 21 years to build. They still wanted that same feeling of 21 years condensed into like 1 year, and that's not possible. That's not the way that it works. So I think that, partially it's, it's an expectation thing, and then also partially is we don't need 3 Marvel films in a year.
That is true. And you're always like making me think, because sometimes I'm like just like hot take, and then you're like, but actually, what if this? And it's like, oh, okay, I guess if I think about it that way, like I can be a little bit more positive and stuff. But I think our friendship may end over the Snyder Cut, but we'll see. No, just kidding. We'll edit that out. We don't want people to think that, but yeah.
That's fair. That's
So,
fair. 4 hours. We've agreed to anything over 2 hours is too long, and that's double 2 hours.
but I
for
watched it
certain
at
stuff.
home, so it was okay. So,
You
yeah.
can watch it at home, or you can take breaks and make your own popcorn. That's for sure. So we have something here, and then we're going to get into one kind of last little section here, talking about like the ethics of de-aging and stuff. Something that's come to the forefront, especially in the light of Indy 5. But we have something here from Marcus. Did we want to read that?
Yeah, Marcus was sick, so he wants to save his voice, and maybe we'll hear him soon in the future for the Chronicles Season 3, so... Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, well, let me get this on here. It says, "Oh, you two know how to trigger me." Oh, this is from Marcus Mosley from the Mosley Review, from Chronicles of a Jedi, and from being on this podcast a bunch of times to come on and help out and lend his voice in various ways. So check out all Marcus's stuff. I'll put the link to his Instagram and stuff down in the show notes, so you can connect with him there. Marcus says, "Oh, you two know how to trigger me in so many ways. Haha. Hello, Old Republic podcast listeners, and hello, Cassia and Brian." Hello, Marcus. It's your one and only Marcus Mosley, and I may not have a voice right now to record this message. We're in the modern age, so text will do fine. Speaking of modern age, we live in the age of modern CGI, that, and for all of its artistry and advancements in what is possible to put on screen, it has completely oversaturated the entertainment industry. I miss the days when CGI was used as a tool to extend the scenery or add to storytelling. The perfect blend between practical effects and digital effects is a magic trick that many of our legendary filmmakers have mastered, and others have never learned how to execute the prestige element of the trick. I miss the days where films were more practical and not these oversaturated worlds of fiction. Let's look at 3 examples of films I think that have been the best and worst in CGI use. They range from stories that use more practical effects that had CGI extensions, which enhance the story, and one that let CGI envelop the film completely, where it felt like an intangible world. Jurassic Park. We all know and love Steven Spielberg's 1993 classic, and there are many video essays on why the film revolutionized CGI and filmmaking for the foreseeable future of storytelling. The reason why it keeps being brought up is that the majority of the film is practical, and the only CGI moments involved the master shots of the T-Rex, quick movements of the raptors, or the moment that we all remember being blown away with the Brachiosaurus making her debut. It was that perfect blend of digital and practical during the T-Rex breakout scene that terrified us all, because for a majority it was real with necessary CGI creations and extensions. Example of great extension: the moment the T-Rex picks up Gennaro off the toilet. It was transitional, one shot from the stuntman sitting to him being picked up, and then to a digital body double being flung left and right. Seamless. There's actually some good stuff on this if you have the Jurassic Park DVD, or if you watch the ILM documentary on Disney Plus. There's some good stuff there. So that's what he has to say about Jurassic Park. The Batman. A more modern film that gets overlooked for its amazing art style and use of CGI in the film. Yeah, the big finale and the massive convention center wave pool was the big CGI finale, but there were so many other well-hidden digital effects. I had the distinct privilege to attend a surprise screening of the film 9 months before its theatrical release. Before the film started, they did the standard, "This film is a work in progress and some shots are not finished" slideshow of some footage that used blue screen and CGI extensions. With that screening, I was amazed how back to basics the film was. Real sets were used with the help of a few shots from the volume that were used in The Mandalorian. Some city CGI backdrops, of course, some CGI was used during the amazing Batmobile chase, and lastly, Batman's cape was cut short just past his shoulder blades and extended out with CGI in at least 6 shots. Matt Reeves made Batman's world seem so real, and a place that looks like a real Gotham City, that I would never want to visit. That was artistry and minimal CGI use at its finest. Okay, that's a really good example of pretty much the way CGI is used in all films these days. Oppenheimer just came out, and Christopher Nolan was very, very explicit on his non-use of CGI, although there was a CGI department, and a lot of that is kind of for things like that. It's kind of in the background that you would never really realize that were done in that way. Then Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Most likely the most egregious use of CGI the MCU has seen in a long time. Don't get me wrong, I love the first 10 years of MCU films, but now it's truly becoming lackluster. No matter how I felt about this film, it looked like a glorified tech demo for an open-world game than an actual realm. The lighting was all over the place in saturation, and sometimes it looked like there wasn't any natural light sources or anything the characters touched seemed real. even during the somewhat confusing action-packed final battle. The main characters are constantly running around, and it felt like they were running on a treadmill. It almost felt like the beautiful but flawed film Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow. With all of the advancements in tech the MCU films have achieved with Thanos, Rocket and Groot, and even Endgame, it felt like a huge step backwards in creativity and practicality. There are so many more examples of amazing advancements, a la James Cameron's Avatar films and Christopher Nolan's much appreciated philosophy of doing everything in camera as much as possible. I just feel we've all started feeling the fatigue of over CGI'd scenes and lackluster storytelling. This may never happen, but I would love to not have any Marvel, DC, Star Wars, or any major big-budgeted CGI films come out for 1 year. Let's not get back to the early mid-90s or late 80s, where we made things for real, where CGI was a last resort instead of starting point of a screenplay. That's why we love movies in the 80s and that us 80s and 90s kids grew up on. It was an inventive time with practical sets, miniatures, and magic. Those are some fair statements there from Marcus. Thank you so much for sending in your thoughts our way.
Yeah, some really good points. And oh my gosh, we even did an episode on the Batman, but like, I feel like so much has happened in the last few years that I kind of literally forgot that that did come out. But I did enjoy it, you know? And I'm kind of feeling good that I haven't seen Quantumania, just the more I hear about it, you know? But I just started listening to a book on my phone, and you're going to laugh when I tell you the title. How to create a more...
Hero with 1,000 Faces. Oh.
No.
Oh.
No. I read that book the way it was written, you know, back in the day, but it's How to Create a More Human World. The Future is Analog, David Sachs, because I'm just like, I'm gonna be funny and, you know, stream that on my phone using Bluetooth. But but I think, like, digital and CGI is here to stay. It can be a good tool in movies, and I mean, I don't really know anything about like how to create CGI. I'm not really like a philosopher. I never even took a philosophy class, you know, back in the day, but I think like this is very easy to say, but very hard to interpret and implement. But I think CGI is best when it is a tool, not a crutch, you know? And I think, like, at the very forefront of any new technology, you have to learn how to, you know, use it. And people have to learn how to, like, actors, people in the movie industry and audiences have to get used to it. I mean, that kind of brings to mind, like, the prequel trilogy for me, because, like, in some ways, like, Lucas is like, this is going to be CGI, that's going to be blue screen, green screen, you just have to imagine it, and some of the actors are just like, what? Like, I don't have a British theater background. I think I brought up the Natalie Portman Lost in Green Screen gif before. It can be a tall ask, you know, for sometimes like young actors, even if like they're Oscar caliber actresses, obviously, but and audiences have to get, like, I think CGI literate too, you know, and I think like maybe the prequel trilogy could have done some things differently, but I don't think we would have had like the high points, you know, in the last few years without like someone kind of like taking the risk that, you know, like George Lucas did with the prequel trilogies, or like Peter Jackson did with Gollum, or, you know, James Cameron with Avatar, you know. So it's like, I think, like, when you can utilize, like, CGI, but, like, it's not like a green screen or a blue screen all the time, but you have something like the volume, or you can kind of, like, see it, you know? And maybe, like, not everything has to be pre-viz, you know? It can be storyboarded too. Like, I think a mixture of digital and analog and real sets and CGI is the best way forward, but it's so easy for me to say that, like, not being in the know, you know? So it's just like, Cassie is like, yeah, you should do it the way I want to see it. Like, it should be a tool, not a crutch. That's very easy to say, and I hope it comes across that I'm aware of that. So
yeah, it's you know, we're going back again to like that double-edged sword, right? Like it does kind of feel that way sometimes, in a sense, but on the other hand, like, it's giving us and creating worlds that would otherwise, you know, be, you know, more or less impossible. You know, you could watch, you know, for example, like the new like Star Wars stuff on TV, and you can pick it apart and be like, I don't, you know, this doesn't look that good, or it could look better, or, you know, it looks like Kenobi's filmed on a golf course right here. I think that came up in our Kenobi episode that we did with Plo Kool. But
I'm not taking it back.
You know, when I think back to watching A New Hope in, I don't know, 1986 or whenever I would have watched it for the first time, like seeing Kenobi then would have like blown me away. Like it's unfathomable that, you know, you get kind of that quality, and it's just a matter of, you know, expectations and what you think about it. And like I said, some things are meant for us. You know, you have brought up the prequels a couple of times now. You know, old grumpy dudes that grew up on, you know, the original trilogy, you know, dragged the prequels through the mud, even though there were more practical shots in The Phantom Menace than there were, I think, like in all three of the original trilogy films put together, because it was an easy thing for them to complain about, you know, kind of same as today, which I'd mentioned there. So I think it's, like I said, it's just about, you know, kind of the expectations that you have, and really at the end of the day, what is the movie made for? Ant-Man and the Quantumania, we've talked about a couple of times. It's a comic book movie. Is it supposed to look real? It's coming from a comic book. Comic books, you know, aren't real. They don't look real. You can't go to a planet that's made of flesh and bone like you might in a comic book and expect it to look, you know, completely realistic. So I think it's a matter of kind of managing your expectations, and then, you know, remembering on, you know, the other end of those computer are people that are doing their best, you know, that really love what they're doing, because, you know, pretty much across the board, they're all underpaid and overworked for the thing that they're doing, and they're only doing it because they love the art of doing it and, you know, trying to create these magic movie moments for us. So keep that in mind out there, I think. And there was one more thing we wanted to talk about here in terms of CGI and kind of the important stuff that we have going, in a little bit more ethical tales, Cassia, but that is the ethics of de-aging or bringing people back from the dead. That is another CGI tool that is a very slippery slope and the cause for great concern amongst a lot of circles right now. So what do you think? What do you think about this de-aging? What do you think about bringing people back from the dead? What do we think?
So going back in time to me seeing Rogue One in IMAX, and I was watching it, and I was like, oh my goodness. Because I don't know why, but I like Peter Cushing, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's CGI. That's a dead actor, but it's CGI and he's in the movie. And I was just kind of like, it kind of brought me back to like George Lucas, like pushing the edge forward. Because it kind of seemed like in the build up to The Force Awakens, and to an extent like The Last Jedi, they're like, yeah, Star Wars means filming with film and practical effects, like not just everything CGI. Like, and it was kind of like the too long didn't listen, you know. It's like, oh, I think they're saying the prequels are bad, you know, a little bit implied there in some of the behind the scenes stuff. And I was like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that, but I was like, I think Lucas would have done this, you know, and like, I think it fit the story. The story wasn't about Tarkin. It wasn't about Tarkin having, you know, a hallway scene and so far we haven't seen another CGI Tarkin, so I loved that effect. But maybe I was naive and didn't think like that it couldn't be used in not so great ways, or maybe even possibly abused. But what do you think?
I think that it's great that you think that the CGI reincarnation of the most one of the most evil men in the whole galaxy cannot be used for bad. That's kind of funny and ironic, in its own sense.
Yeah.
Rogue One is a really good film. You got CGI, Princess Leia, CGI, Tarkin in there. Neither of them needed to be in there. I don't like that they're in there at all. Leia could have been shot from behind, could have been an actress playing that role. Didn't need to be CGI Carrie Fisher. You can't tell me there wasn't some archival footage of Vader and Tarkin standing in front of a window from A New Hope they could have used for that shot and not recreated them digitally. I don't buy that for a second. I don't like their inclusion there. De-aging, I think, is kind of okay. I think it opens the door in a lot of ways for your storytelling. But I mostly think it's okay if you're using the actual actor in that sort of film. Like Joe Pesci in The Irishman, I think was de-aged potentially. I could be getting that actor wrong there. Or you have Samuel L. Jackson being de-aged for Captain Marvel. I think that stuff like that is okay. But if you're talking about doing that to a character that's non-existent or not part of the story, or just bringing people back from the dead, that's like a bridge too far for me. And that's kind of a problem then for the storytellers to get around. To either do something with recasting, or the way that you're telling it, or the way that you're showing it. So I'm not a big fan of it, to be honest.
Okay, our friendship is officially over because you didn't like Tarkin CGI.
CGI Tarkin bad.
Yeah. No, just kidding. But yeah, I guess I just like always assume like the best, and like I'm like they won't abuse this, like I didn't end up seeing The Flash. I think you had that privilege, but yeah, it's like when you're kind of bringing back actors from the dead, like I think like with in the instance of Tarkin, they had permission from his family and his estate.
Yeah.
So like I guess that can be good, but sometimes like yeah, I don't know, like cuz in The Rise of Skywalker, tragically Carrie Fisher had passed away, and in some ways I wish they could have just like been like, let's recast her, or just like say she died off screen. I don't think anyone was happy kind of like with like kind of just like the ghost, like she was there but like through archival footage, like it just didn't seem real, and that's unfortunate. Like it's just like tragic, most tragic that Carrie Fisher passed away, like and like just like her final role is just like a film she wasn't really in, So yeah, just lots of things to think about. Like I don't know if there's like a nice pretty answer. Maybe there'll be some philosophers like years from now, like that will be like, here's the ethics of CGI in a nice, thus spake CGI Christopher Reeves, but yeah, I think that's kind of why some actors are striking. It's like you scanned me for CGI for stunt work, but like some that data's kind of just in the ether, like floating there, and like if I die like 50 years from now, could that be used? Like, who would be approving that, I don't know if I have a nice, pretty answer. Do you have a nice, pretty, thought-out answer?
No, I don't really have a nice, pretty answer because it's so murky and complicated, and there's so much of it that we don't understand. I will say I think that it's important that the groundwork gets laid for how that stuff is used now before it gets like too far gone, where we can't wrangle it back in. And I think that's kind of the big thing here in terms of de-aging and computer animated real life people, how you use those assets, to stuff like Chat GPT, writing scripts, like that stuff is important to get locked down now, because if we don't do it now, then it's going to be too late to ever do it, I think. So
Yeah.
fight the good fight, and try to get that worked out. I think at a bare minimum you need the permission of, like you said, Peter Cushing's estate. That's great, but then ultimately, then who gets to decide what they do? The first episode of season 1 of Black Mirror kind of deals with that, right? So you can use my likeness, but what are you going to use it for exactly? So a lot of little details to iron out, and I don't pretend to be some sort of great mind about these things, but I think it's important that we kind of lay the groundwork for what it's going to mean going forward as these technologies get better and better and more realistic and things like that.
Yeah, so if you were listening to this episode and it's like, I really want to learn like how to do CGI shots and like what they think about like the ethics of like reviving dead actors, they'll just be like, okay, she just really likes seeing Tarkin in CGI for some reason, but I didn't really learn anything. But I guess it's kind of just more like, this is a thinking episode. We don't have the answers. If someone has the answers, it's not us. So
that's right. If you have the answers or have any sort of opinions on those, feel free to drop us a comment down below the YouTube video if you're watching this there, or let us know on the social medias, Discord, stuff like that, because it's an interesting conversation to have, and I think everyone's kind of own personal perspective on it is going to be a little bit different. So let us know what you think about the use of CGI kind of in movies from your childhood and movies of today and everywhere in between. Let us know all that stuff, and thanks for checking this one out. This was a fun one, and kind of a fun kind of thought experiment, I guess, for me at least. So
yeah, all right, may the force be with you.